resisting the urge to sing Tiny Tim's best-known song right now. Tiptoe through the window, through the garden, up by the willow tree, and tiptoe through the tulips with me. But you could see that temptation was impossible to resist, because that is really a truly timeless, classic, great pop song. And what a great segue. Speaking of timeless, great, classic pop songs, you got little old me, the guy who likes to talk about him. Me, Malcolm Tent, bringing you Tent Talks Tunes, as I am prone to do every single week. On the dreaded Facebook live feed. Let me get myself adjusted here so I am front and center. Oh, yes. You guys can see me. You can see my fantastic bulletin board. You can see my Japanese Ultraman t-shirt. All the fun, good things in life. You can see me sipping from my gallon of hickory tap. Hearing the sounds of it? Yes. You got it all. At least we think you got it all. Now, you know that before I start talking tunes, I have to reach over and check the monitor and make sure that I am going out live. And if I am, people are seeing me. Because it's always a roll of the dice here on the internet. Of course, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, where episodes of Tent Talks Tunes are archived permanently, you don't have to worry about it, because you know it's there, you know it's up, you know that it did indeed stream successfully on Facebook on Wednesday at 7 p.m., and all is well. But here, in the excitement of the moment, in the fog of battle, such as it were, we don't know that. We have no such reassurances, so thus the necessity for doing what I just done. So we're live, everything's happening. We got Alan Versapellis, as usual, first one in the house. Hello, Alan. We got my pal Adam from way out in the sticks of the Peach State. Hello, Adam. Good to have you there. Adam, you might be interested to know that I have taken it upon myself to listen to every single Frank Zappa CD randomly from start to finish. I'm not doing it chronologically. I'm not doing it thematically. I'm just reaching over to the shelf and picking out a Frank Zappa CD and giving it a listen. And there's about half of them so far that I have been able to make it through from start to finish and enjoy. Probably about 25% of which I make it a large part of the way through and enjoy. And about 25% which I listen to for about a minute and go, ugh. And somehow, I think Frank would be very happy to hear that. I think he would be very happy to know that his music affects at least one person in so many different ways. I think he would probably say, well, if you didn't like that one, just play another one. If you don't like that one, go play the Bay City Rollers. I don't care. I can hear him saying that. Oh, I can hear him saying that. A toast to the ghost of Frank Zappa. Oh, yeah. So what did I just show you people as my opening card here on Tent Talks Tunes? Well, you can see it's a record. It's got Tiny Tim on the label. If you flip it over, it's got G.G. Allin on the label. Oh my gosh, this must be the long-awaited and much vaunted G.G. Allin Tiny Tim split 12-inch maxi single entitled Beautifully Ugly. I have spent the last 2 weeks or so sitting on my living room floor assembling these, taking the records, sticking them into the covers, and making sure that each one gets a special 11-inch by 11-inch photographic insert to make a complete package. This is 9 songs, all unplugged, and mayhap even all unhinged. 4 songs by Gigi, 5 songs by Tiny. And you might think this is kind of an unlikely pairing, but if you watched Tent Talks Tunes a week or two ago, you would have seen that I devoted an entire program to the startling similarities between Gigi and Tiny. Not all of them very obvious, but all of them deep-rooted and for real. And if you go onto my aforementioned YouTube channel, you can find that archived episode of Tent Talks Tunes with the greatest of ease. And while you're there, you should subscribe. I really don't know what happens if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, other than the common wisdom is that you should subscribe. So there, I just regurgitated the common wisdom. You should subscribe to my YouTube channel. And I guess when I get a couple 100,000 subscribers, I'll start to earn 2 or 3 cents a quarter as having my YouTube channel monetized. Whatever, I don't know. I do this for the love. Obviously, not the money. So yeah, this is going to be out very, very soon. I'm aiming for a Sunday night live launch to have Beautifully Ugly by Tiny Tim and Gigi Allen on my eBay and my Discogs. Not on my Bandcamp, because Punk Media, my good pal Mark at Punk Media, has the exclusive rights to streaming and digital platforms. So if you want to get Beautifully Ugly in a streaming or downloadable format, I'm sure if you just look it up or look up Punk Media, there's the spelling for you, P-O-N-K, Punk Media, you'll be able to find it and his many other fine releases on that label. He's done stuff by Gigi and Tiny Tim, also Sleepy LaBeef, Nervous Norvis, and probably a few others. Good guy, good label. And for all you collectors, I'm just going to show you something right here. This is one of 4 copies. Count them, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 copies on Tiger Wax. This is a sort of black and orange smeared, swirled vinyl. We got these in 4 different colors of vinyl: blue, green, orange, and black. And apparently that's the order that the vinyl was made in, because you can see the transitional colors between green and orange, and then orange and black. The green and orange transitional vinyl is really not that dramatic, but we got these 4 copies in which the orange and black vinyl were co-mingled in the press and came up with this really cool dramatic effect. So I'm going to get 2, and Mark's going to get 2. I'm not selling mine, guys, because I'm not just the label head. I'm also a fanboy and a collector. Mark, I'm not sure what he intends to do with his. So that's all the more reason to look up Punk, P-O-N-K, Punk Media, and maybe pester him to death about getting you one of them if you're that kind of a rabid fanboy collector, like I am. Let's see. Mike Lesser from Vancouver, BC is saying colors. So many colors. It's true. Katie saying hi or hey. Hey, Katie. Hi, Katie. Hi and hey. So many words, so many ways to say hi. So many ways to say hey. That's basically, I guess that's the mailbox. I haven't gotten anything at P.O. Box 173, Newton, North Carolina, 28658 lately. But I did get these via UPS, so I guess that's the mailbox. Let's check out the bulletin board. We got some exciting stuff going on here. Next week, not this coming weekend, but the weekend after that, September 19th and 20th, Rule Breakers Ball at Ground Zero in Spartanburg, South Carolina. You have not 1, not 2, not 5, but 10. 10 bands spread out over the course of 2 nights. Any one of these bands could be a headliner at a show anywhere on planet Earth. 10 headlining bands. Night 1, Taped Fist, Future Hate, Knowledge is for Fools, Before I Hang, and Rancid Vat. Night 2, Josephus and the George Jonestown Massacre. I got it right. Sweet Georgia Brown, Wrath of Typhon, The Self-Made Monsters, and, well, let's face it, when you got 10 headlining bands, one actually does have to headline. And of course, that could only be the one, the only, Antiseen. the 42-year undefeated reigning world heavyweight champions of rock and roll, of which I am proudly the 13th, and as far as I'm concerned, last bass player that band will ever have. Yes, lucky 13, 4-string guitar basher right here, kids. All drink to me. Ah, it's good to be me. So yeah, that is next weekend. After that, looking forward to the month of October, October 10th and 11th. Did I get that right? Hey, I think I did get that right. October 10th and 11th at the Beachland Ballroom in Cleveland, Ohio. You've got the 25th annual Devotional Devo Fan Convention. Kind of a similar situation to the Rule Breakers Ball. 2 days worth of exciting, devolved entertainment and education. Bands galore. We have special guest DJ Lance Rock from Yo Gabba Gabba. He'll be spinning fine vinyl the entire weekend and hosting the pinball party in Cleveland, which I don't know exactly when that is, but the pinball party is an integral part of the weekend festivities at Devotional, and Lance Rock will be there providing the appropriate soundtrack for all of that. I'm excited because I've put together a band for Devotional. It's called David Kendrick's Quintophrenia. David Kendrick's Quintophrenia. And what is that? Well, you start with David Kendrick, who was Devo's drummer in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Before that, he was the drummer for Sparks during their entire awesome and wonderful New Wave period. Currently, the drummer for Shoo Shoo, which if you have not seen live, you need to see live because it's one heck of an experience. And also a very talented lyricist and composer in his own right. So we're putting together a tribute band. He's playing drums, and we're going to be playing songs from Devo, Sparks, Shoo Shoo, Gleaming Spires, and Bates Motel. All bands that he had an integral part in. So that's going to be really, really cool. If there's one thing I love, it's getting to share the stage with people who I respect and admire musically. And David Kendrick definitely qualifies as both. So October 10th and 11th, Cleveland, Ohio. 2 weeks after that, you got the Brown Mountain Lights Festival in Morganton, North Carolina. October 25th is the date. It's an all-day, all-night gala, no-tie affair. It's strictly cash. You got a big old slate of bands playing with, of course, Antiseen on top. We're going to be at that big old outdoor amphitheater they have in downtown Morganton, and it's going to be fun. You know why? Because we'll be able to crank it up, which sort of ties into today's theme of Tent Talks Tunes, but we'll get there in a minute. October 25th, you better believe it. And then looking forward into November, you've got November 15th, the Danbury Records CD and Expo. I am the co-promoter of Danbury and Connecticut's longest running record show. I will be set up there with 3 tables of fine, fine merchandise. And looking forward to see everybody out there in the real, in the raw, in the flesh, in a vinyl collector's paradise. Yes! And that, my friends, takes care of both the mailbox and the bulletin board. I'm going to hit the refresh button on my monitor here because the picture seems to have frozen. Pretty sure I'm still going out live, but I'm not seeing people's reactions and comments and stuff. And that's at least part of the fun here on Tent Talks Tunes. We like to see the human element, even though this is an inhuman format. I'll drink to that. All right. So, as the header says, how loud can too loud go? Oh, yes. How loud can too loud go? You know, if you're tuned into Tent Talks Tunes, and you've been tuned into Tent Talks Tunes, odds are pretty good that you're a music fan. And if you're a music fan, odds are pretty good that you've seen some bands play live in concert. And if you've seen bands play live in concert, odds are pretty good that you've seen some loud-ass mofos. Oh, yes. Rock and roll, by its very nature, is a loud means of expression. Yes. Rock and roll, simply because of the fact you have a drummer on a stage pounding those drums with a pair of wooden sticks. Drums are loud. There's just no getting around it. Drums are loud. And so in order to compete with the sound of drums, you got to turn the guitars up, and you got to have a big old PA system to turn the vocals up, just to be heard over the drums. And when done correctly, to be heard in good balance with the drums. So, obviously a rock and roll show is going to be loud no matter what. Oh, but sometimes, oh yeah, sometimes the bands get really loud. Oh yeah. Sometimes the bands get super duper loud. Sometimes the bands get so loud you can physically feel the vibrations pummeling every molecule in your body. Oh yes. Oh yes. So I've been going to live shows now for 45 years. Longer than some of you viewers have even been on this planet. And I want to tell you about some of the loudest bands I've ever seen. And not only that, the different qualities and characteristics of their respective loudnesses. What made them loud, what the effect of the loudness was, all of the above. Now, my pal Adam Zisser, down there in Georgia, has already mentioned that the two loudest bands he's ever seen were The Ministry and Black Flag. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. The first band I ever saw that was, at the time, of course, obviously the loudest band, because you got to start somewhere, might be kind of a surprise. But my first experience with rock and roll, seeing a full-fledged rock and roll band in concert, was, as we know, or maybe not, Devo, live on the Freedom of Choice tour in 1980. I was a callow 15-year-old, never been to a concert, didn't know what to expect, really. So, I walk into the Guzman Cultural Center in downtown Miami, a room that was vaunted to be acoustically perfect, thinking, well, it's an acoustically perfect room. It's going to just sound great. I mean, what's more to it? It can't be any different than listening to, a record at home or listening to the radio at home. So, I go in there and take my seat, and they're playing some music over the PA system before the band goes on and people are coming in. And it was, loud enough to hear, and I thought, okay, this is pleasant. I can deal with this. This is not bad at all. This is completely comfortable and within the realms of a reasonable listening experience. No problem. That goes on for a while. Then the lights go down. The announcer comes out and says, and now, maybe we begin an evening with Devo. And the big old screen comes down from the ceiling, and they start showing their introductory movies. And that's when I got the notion that maybe I was in trouble, because those movies were played loud. They had the films cranked up at a volume equivalent to a band live in concert. It was loud. I wasn't ready for that. Was definitely not ready for that. Within about 10 seconds, I heard the characteristic in my ears from the excessive volume. I thought, I don't know if I like this. This is really, this kind of hurts. And that went on for the, 15 or 20 minutes that the films were shown. And then the screen goes up, and I see the band come out, and they start playing, and it's just like louder than the films. And now my ears are really going. I was still able to make out what the band was playing. I could hear the music, I could hear the lyrics, but man, it was just like filtered through this this filter of white noise and static. Kind of like watching the static on a TV set like we used to do back in the day. That's what it sounded like. And wouldn't you know it, Devo, you think, oh yeah, the funny guys with the flower pots on their heads, new wave band, they always played really loud. Their music was always meant to have an impact and a force. And I certainly felt it at that first concert I ever went to. It was loud. And I've spoken to a few people over the years who were there, and they all remarked upon the same thing. They said, yeah, Devo was loud. And these are mostly people older than I am who had a lot of experience going to concerts, and they also agreed that Devo was amongst the louder of the bands they had ever experienced. So that was my baptism of sonic fire into the world of concert going. After that, I made it a point to wear earplugs to every single show I ever attended, every band I ever played with, every rehearsal, everything. It's the only concert I ever went to in my entire life where I did not have hearing protection, except for some of the very quieter ones or acoustic shows. If there's a full band on that stage, the earplugs go in, which is why at the ripe old age of almost 61, my hearing is still pretty good. Like I can literally hear a paperclip hit the floor from across the room, and I'm very happy about that. So you might say, well, Mr. Smarty Pants, if your hearing is that good, and you always have earplugs in, how do you know a band is loud? Well, because of what I mentioned before about the physical impact of it. The physical force of the music. I mean, even if you got earplugs, you know when a band is louder than normal. And of course, who's the first band that you think of when you think of loud bands? There might be a couple of top contenders, but really, there's only one. There's only one band that comes to mind immediately when you think of bands that are excruciatingly loud. Of course, big old duh, Motorhead. So the question might be, was Motorhead the loudest band I ever saw? They had to have been. I'm going to say no, they were not. Motorhead were not the loudest band I ever saw. Now, mind you, I saw them 3 times. Saw them once in '94, opening for Black Sabbath. I saw one of Lemmy's final shows in Connecticut, and I saw them at a venue in Danbury, Connecticut called Tuxedo Junction. The Black Sabbath show and one of Lemmy's final shows were not that loud, in the grand scheme of things. Like, obviously, since Motorhead were the opener for Black Sabbath, they weren't going to get top volume. Black Sabbath, of course, took that honor. And I honestly don't remember them being that loud. It was just like a regular loud rock and roll concert. The late period show I saw, you could tell that a lot of volume was coming off the stage, but the PA compensated for it. Like, all the volume coming off the stage was not going through the PA, because that would have been painfully loud. Instead, the PA was just filling in the vocals and some of the, higher and lower frequencies, and the volume coming off the stage sort of blended in with it. So it really wasn't that loud. However, the time I saw them at Tuxedo Junction in Danbury, that was loud. That was probably classic Motorhead volume. When I went to shows at Tuxedo's, I had my favorite spot. The way Tuxedo's was laid out was you had the stage, the main room, and then at the very back of the room, there was a crow's nest where the DJ did his thing. So I would always, because I was an in, I was the local record store guy, so I had my in at the venue. My spot was always up there in the crow's nest. That's where I would watch the bands. And so I remember very clearly seeing Motorhead playing at Danbury's Tuxedo Junction, and I was all the way in the back of the room, all the way up in the crow's nest, yes, with my hearing protection in, but I felt the hair on the back of my neck vibrating from the noise. And this was in the back of the room. You know, they're putting up that much volume that they're vibrating the hair on the back of my neck. And I looked out and I saw that room full of people. And I didn't do like a scientific survey or anything, but, you know, I was able to see plenty of people out there who did not have hearing protection. And to this day, I cannot comprehend why or how anybody could enjoy a concert with that kind of just sheer volume going into their ears unprotected. Doesn't that hurt? I mean, does anybody out there have insight to offer on this? That's got to be painful, you know? I've had instances where my earplugs have slipped out during a loud show, and I hear that immediately, and I feel the pain of that, and just like very quickly stuff my ears back up. How do you do it? Those of you who don't wear earplugs or hearing protection, how do you enjoy a concert when it's that loud? Is it just the way I perceive that amount of noise? Is it just painful to me? I don't know. Please leave a comment. I got to know. I'm very curious. So anyway, out of 3 Motorhead shows I saw, 1 was absolutely very, very loud. But I still don't think the loudest. Now, I did have one experience with volume involving Black Sabbath. I also saw Sabbath 3 times in 84, 92, and 94. The show in 94, where Motorhead opened, was at about a 500-seat club called The Sting in New Britain. And as mentioned before, it wasn't horrifically loud. In 92, I saw them at the Beacon Theater in New York City. Same deal. Regular rock concert volume, not bone-crushingly loud. The first time was in 84 at the Sunrise Music Theater in Fort Lauderdale. And even though I don't remember feeling the physical presence of the volume, there was one instance that kind of illustrated how loud Black Sabbath was. This was before the band took the stage. And you got to remember, the Sunrise Music Theater was about I believe a 3,000-seater. So pretty respectable amphitheater size, but not a giant arena or a barn. Big enough, but not huge. So Black Sabbath has, you know, their backline. And oh wait, before I continue with the story, Per from Sweden says that Motorhead was the loudest. Took his earplugs out for a moment and it was painful. I believe it. And this kind of relates to the story I'm telling now. I think that the size of the room has an awful lot to do with it. So Black Sabbath, 3,000-seater. I remember very clearly Geezer Butler's bass tech was on stage, you know, tuning up, tweaking levels, and he turned one of the amps up and you could hear the bass. It wasn't bad. Everybody in the audience, of course, was like, turn it up, come on, man, crank it, turn it up. And I remember so well, the bass tech just kind of looked over his shoulder and was like, yeah? Everybody's like, yeah! So he just very casually reached over, flicked a switch, and the bass went, boom! And I went, whoa! And I did not have my earplugs in, but oh boy, we heard that. Just the flick of one little switch. Pretty damned impressive. So the earplugs went in almost instantly and enjoyed the show. But in spite of that, I don't remember the band being really that incredibly loud. But that moment with the bass amp, that was one for the books. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'll tell you, you talk about the size of the room and the dynamics of volume. There are bands like Motorhead who use volume to just kind of club you over the head, you know. Ace Frehley was one of those. I've seen Ace a number of times. When he started doing comeback shows back in 1992, you know, he lived in the area around Danbury. So he was playing all these shows in Connecticut and New York State. I saw him in North Salem, New York, New Haven, Danbury, Poughkeepsie, New Britain, Connecticut. He was just like playing the area an awful lot. And he played Danbury multiple times. One time I will never forget is when Ace Frehley was playing at Tuxedo Junction in Danbury. Again, same venue as when I saw Motorhead. And, you know, I was doing my usual thing up in the crow's nest, but I decided to go down on the floor and see what it was like down there, you know. So I walk down there and I make my way up towards the front of the stage, and holy cannoli, the volume up front was a whole different animal from the volume way in the back of the room. The hairs in the back of my neck were definitely not vibrating up there in the crow's nest for Ace Frehley, but when I got down there toward the front, I could not believe the sheer noise that Ace Frehley's band was putting out. I'm sure you guys know that if you're close to the PA or close to the drums, every time the drummer hits the kick drum, you can feel it. You know, if it's loud enough, you can feel the impact of that kick drum in your chest. Ace Frehley was hitting guitar notes that kicked me in the chest the same way that the drummer would have. Never mind what was coming out from the drums. Because Ace Frehley, as you may know, has got a very percussive style of playing. He really hits the strings when he plays. And so he would hit the string, and every time he hit the string, the note would go boom, boom, boom in my chest. And of course, there's the other guitar at that volume, and the bass at that volume, and the drums at that volume. And yeah, I had my earplugs in, but I said, you know what? I have had enough of this. I am not doing this anymore. Goodbye. Back to the crow's nest, where I could enjoy the show without being pummeled by the notes that Ace Frehley himself was playing on his guitar, for God's sake. Good Lord. Other bands are a lot more subtle about it. Other bands use volume to sort of make a giant sonic palette, to create a tapestry of sound, if you will. One of my favorite examples of such is Acid Mother's Temple, the Japanese hippie band, who I have not seen in a number of years, and I'm not sure what they're up to now, but they used to tour the States relentlessly, and they always put on one heck of a show. And the one I remember the most is when they played a very small venue in New Haven, Connecticut called Cafe 9. Cafe 9, I see that Ed Flynn is tuned in. He says that High on Fire was the loudest band he ever saw, and he's got some anecdotes about that. Ed, would you agree with me if I say that Cafe 9 could probably comfortably hold maybe 150 people max, if you like really shoehorned everybody in there? That's kind of my guess. If you really crammed Cafe 9 full, you could probably get about 150 in there. Maybe 200. So Acid Mother's Temple are playing this very small venue. And Acid Mother's Temple are definitely volume merchants. Very, very, very loud. But very tastefully done. Like when they play that loud, you can still hear all the instruments very clearly. You can hear the vocals very clearly. You can hear a great balance between the drums and the instruments. So it's louder than a fudgesicle, but it sounds good. You know, Ace Frehley at that volume, sorry, he didn't sound that good. Motorhead at their volume, I could tell what they were playing. That's really about it. Acid Mother's Temple sounded fantastic. And Ed, who's commenting now, says that he stood right in front. I did the exact same thing last time they played. I stood right in front, which is basically like I had my foot on the stage. You know, I was on stage with Acid Mother's Temple. And I swear to you guys, the entire pocket of air around me was vibrating. You could feel the air itself just vibrating with this pure sound. This was more than just the hairs on the back of my neck. This was the hairs on my arms. This was my eyelashes and eyebrows. My entire body vibrating with the sheer volume of sound. And it sounded great, especially with the earplugs in, because it wasn't all just going in my ears. I was able to absorb the sound with every molecule of my body. And it felt good and it sounded great. So Acid Mother's Temple definitely get a vote for loudest band ever, but very pleasurably loud. Another band like that, one of my absolute favorite bands, Godspeed You Black Emperor. Oh man. Anybody who knows me or has known me for a while knows what an absolute mark I am for Godspeed You Black Emperor. In case you don't know, Godspeed You Black Emperor are a Canadian mini electric orchestra. Membership hovers around 8 or 9 members, and their setup has evolved over the years to where the last few times I've seen them play live, they play in a kind of a V shape on the stage. On one side, you've got one guitar, a violinist, a bass player, and a drummer, sometimes a cello player. On the other side, you've got a guitarist, yet another guitarist, another bass player, and a percussionist. So basically you're looking at 3 guitars, 2 basses, 2 drummers, and a violin, and sometimes a cellist, with also occasional keyboards and every once in a great while a sampler. I mean, they really change it up an awful lot, but that's the basic structure. And they have it set up so they're facing the audience like this. And it's kind of like having 2 different bands playing at each other. It's really awesome to watch them interact as they trade back and forth. And sometimes the sound just goes around in a circle on the stage. I mean, really, really incredible. 99% instrumental. And just the very fact that you've got all that firepower on stage plus 2 drummers, you know it's going to be loud just by the sheer dint of the numbers. Add that to the fact that they just like to crank it up. They play a lot of custom gear and a lot of really big amps on that stage, and they're all turned up really loud. So you've got 8 or 9 Canadians up there going at each other, and it's kind of the same deal. It's just done very tastefully. The music is like a wave coming at you. So much so that on a couple of occasions, it sounded so good, I was like, can it really be that loud? I mean, I know it's loud because I can feel it. I can feel it. Usually with those guys, I'm front row center on the stage because that's the way to experience those guys. And in venues where they have subwoofers under the stage for the bass frequencies, you can feel the subwoofers. I mean, to use the analogy of the bass drum earlier, it's like being kicked every time a bass frequency comes up. So the band is playing loud enough to inspire that kind of response from the PA, and loud enough to complement that amount of volume coming out of the PA. So you know it's a total high decibel package, but it's so perfectly mixed and sounds so good that it doesn't feel that loud. It's not like Ace Frehley who's pummeling you to death. It's more of a giant caress. So on a couple of occasions, I've taken the earplugs out just to see what it actually sounds like. And sure enough, it was just like... Pain began in about 15 seconds. Earplugs went back in. The enjoyment was re-continued. But man, those guys are loud. They are so loud. So loud, so wonderful. Going back to the opposite end of the spectrum, we've gone from the ridiculous to the sublime, back to the ridiculous. Another all-time popular favorite bunch of volume merchants whose name is inevitably going to come up in the roster of bands who just crank it up to absurd levels. You can probably guess. We already mentioned Motorhead. John Bridges says Jucifer made his walls hurt. I believe it. But no, not Jucifer. How about some Dinosaur Jr. people? Oh, how about some Dinosaur Jr.? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have now, at this stage of the game, seen Dinosaur Jr. twice, I believe. Only twice, yeah. First time was in 1991 on the Green Mind tour with one of Jay Mascis's many scab lineups. Second time was 2000s, couldn't tell the exact date, probably 2006, 2007, something like that. After the original lineup got back together again, and they just done their first reunion album. So it's Jay Mascis, Lou Barlow, and Murph playing at Toad's Place in New Haven, which is about a 600 or 700 seater. And the 1991 show was not that loud. It was just like a regular rock and roll show. The reunion show with the original lineup was to coin a phrase, gratuitous sludge feast. This is when Jay Mascis had his room of amplifiers. You know, he'd play in this room surrounded on three sides by amps. And Lou Barlow had a pretty impressive array on his own. And of course, old Murph is back there pounding away at the tubs, hoping that the PA is adequate enough to keep up with all this juice they're putting out. My friends, I'm here to tell you that even with the earplugs in, that was one of the most gratuitously loud dins of noise I've ever heard in my life. It was just pure sludge coming out of that PA at punishing levels. I felt the physical force. I felt the vibration of the air. But it sounded like shiznit. It was ridiculous. It was just like one blast of mud falling down a hillside after another. I'm not joking, guys. I couldn't tell what songs they were playing. I absolutely could not tell what song was what. And I could hear the drums in there. I could hear them in the midst of all this, it's just bullshit they were putting out. It was just like 75 minutes of ridiculous. Just gratuitously loud and pointless. I think if they had taken it down a few decibels, it might have made a little more sense. But that was sheer volume that was not being put to a good use in any way, shape, or form. It was just absurd. And that was the last time I saw them, and I really don't have any plans to go see them again. It was just ridiculous. Sorry, Dino. That's just one man's opinion. To go back from the ridiculous to the sublime, and while we're still at Toad's Place in New Haven, Connecticut, pretty sure the last show I ever attended at Toad's was back in 2015 or so, and it was the Swans. Oh yes, the Swans, Michael Guerra's jolly band of roving merry minstrels. Saw the Swans 3 times. First time was in the early 90s when they were in their sort of like gothic cathedral magnificence phase when Jarbo was in the band. Actually saw them 4 times. Saw them twice in that phase. Saw their supposed last ever show in 1998. And then this show in New Haven in 2015 or so. And for whatever reason, once again, I found myself front row center right there on the stage. I normally stand back by the soundboard because, as you guys know, I'm a fanatic for recording the shows. Oh, yes, I love to record the shows. And generally speaking, the spot back by the board is the sweet spot. And as I tell the tale, I recall that the sweet spot in Toad's place was about halfway back from the stage and halfway in front of the soundboard. In other words, right in front, in the dead center of the room where the mosh pit would be. And as I remember, either it was just too crowded or the crowd was just a little too unwieldy or too riled up or whatever. For some reason, I didn't want to be in that spot because it just wasn't working. So I said, all right, whatever. I'll just go straight up to the front and I'll have the crowd behind me so they won't be pushing me around or they won't be too loud or whatever. And I'll just record what's coming off the stage. And with the vocal monitors on either side of me, I'll get the vocals as well. You know, kind of makes sense. So I'm remembering all this stuff now. I went right up front, and it was kind of a similar situation to Godspeed You Black Emperor and Acid Mother's Temple. These guys had everything cranked up to mind-numbing, ear-destroying levels. But it was very well balanced. It sounded very clean. It actually sounded very airy. It was kind of the same deal. I felt the pounding in my chest. I felt the vibration on my skin. And I couldn't hear the drummer. The various guitarists and bassists and keyboardists were putting out so much volume from the stage that I couldn't even hear the drummer. And the drummer was just like 5 feet in front of me. So you know when you're standing 5 feet in front of a drum kit and you can't hear the blessed thing, that's loud. That's really loud. And in fact, they had a guy playing vibraphone over on house left. I didn't hear one note come off of that vibraphone. And the only reason I heard anything from the keyboard player was because it was blasting out of the monitors at frightening concert volumes. I mean, it was really, really nuts. And I was talking to the guy who promoted the show afterwards, and he said, yeah, we had a decibel meter in the back of the room, and it was the highest rating we've ever had here at Toad's Place. It was in the danger zone. And I said, brother, I believe it. Judging by what was coming off of the stage, I can only imagine what they were putting out at full force through the PA. It was really something. The funniest thing of all about that show, with just the intense amount of power they were putting out, was that every once in a while, they had this one guitarist up there next to Michael Gira. Every once in a while, this guy would turn around and make a little tiny adjustment on a knob on his amp. Like turn it just 1/2 of a notch, like from 6 to 6.5, you know, or turn it down from like 3 to 3 3/4. And I'm like, how can this guy even hear an adjustment like that? How would he even know if he turned it all the way up or all the way down with the fucking noise these guys are generating? But he did that a couple times during the night. I guess he could hear the difference. I don't know. It just sounded like one big to me. Woo, doggy. Gene Moore says that Cypress Hill's bass frequencies gave him heart palpitations. You know, that reminds me of the time I saw KRS-One at Toad's Place. And yes, it was the exact same thing. I got to admit, after seeing KRS-One play, I understood why all these low riders and twin pipers drive around with the bass frequencies cranked up so much that they vibrate your windows when they drive by. It's because that shiz sounds awesome when it's turned up that loud and that low. I got it then. I got it. Hearing KRS-One do his thing live in concert was like a force of nature. It was like being in the middle of a thundercloud while it was having a lightning storm. That's how incredibly immense the bass was. And I'm glad you reminded me of that, Gene, because I have to put KRS-One in the level of the loudest concert experiences I've ever had, and it was all because of the bass. And we all know, bass is the place. Oh yeah. But I gotta close by telling you guys about the single loudest concert I've ever been to. I'm talking about louder than Motorhead, louder than Ace Frehley, louder than Acid Mother's Temple, louder than Godspeed You Black Emperor, louder than Dinosaur Jr., louder than the bass generated by KRS-One, louder than anybody I've talked to on this episode of Tent Talks Tunes. The single loudest concert I've ever been to was, and I'm going to preface this by saying that I saw The Who once. I saw The Who in 1982. And you know, The Who have always had the reputation of being one of the loudest bands on planet Earth. I saw The Who in Orlando, Florida on their supposed farewell tour in 1982, whoop-de-doo, in a football stadium with 60,000 drunken rednecks. And I really wanted it to be the loudest band I'd ever experienced. They were not. Their sound was impotent, it was wussy, it was weak, and it made me really, really angry because it was so pathetic. Not to mention the fact that it was supposed to be their last ever tour, and it wasn't. And I could have gone to see Devo that night on what was their last ever tour with the original lineup. One of the worst concert-going mistakes I've ever made. Going to see a bunch of impotent schlubs like The Who when I could have gone to see Devo at the peak of their powers. So I saw The Who, and they flat out sucked. So who was the loudest concert I've ever attended? John Entwistle. Yes, the bass player for The Who, John Entwistle, put on the most gratuitously excessive, over-the-top, beyond reason, unnecessary, WTF loud performance I've ever experienced in my life. Even more so than Dinosaur Jr. in terms of just utterly pointless volume. This was back at Tuxedo Junction in Danbury. The year was 1995, 1996-ish. And John Entwistle, would tour a lot because he loved touring and The Who weren't on the road very often. So he had a band who were from the New York State area, and they would go out and just play clubs. And the music that they played was, AOR rock, adult-oriented rock. Middle-of-the-road rock. No big deal. But I swear to God, they had no sense of proportion. They had their stuff cranked up to stadium levels. And this is where I get back to how the size of the room makes an awful lot of difference when you're considering the volume of the concert. I don't know if John Entwistle just didn't know any better, or he was oblivious, or maybe he was so completely deaf that he couldn't hear otherwise. But these guys were putting out enough decibels to fill a stadium. But they were in a 500 or 600 seat nightclub. It was excruciating. even back up at my spot in the crow's nest, all the way up in the back of the room, it was just so over the top, pumping out through the PA, stupidly loud. It was impossible to enjoy the music. This is with earplugs, and this is in the back of the room. And the music they were playing, it didn't justify it, you know? It's like a band like Godspeed You Black Emperor or Acid Mother's Temple. You play at extreme volume with extreme clarity, and you get the phantom chords, and you get the shimmer effect, and you get the overall envelopment in this sort of gelatinous blob of pure sound, and it works. You know, it really works. You know, even Ace Frehley, there was just something about the sheer impact of that kind of rock and roll played at that volume that it made sense. You know, it really did. But, oh man, just hearing this borderline mellow rock that freaking loud, it just didn't make any sense at all. I couldn't even enjoy it because the music wasn't even that good, and it was just so damned loud. So much so, and you want a little quantification of how loud it was? Y'all know I love to tape shows. Love taping shows. And for a long time, I had access to the soundboard feed at this venue. So I recorded a lot of shows off the board. And this John Entwistle show, I recorded it, took the tape home to see just what it sounded like. Like, what did this actually sound like coming through the PA? Stuck in the cassette deck, hit the play button, and from the first note, all I heard was they played so loud they fried the soundboard feed. They put out more volume than the soundboard feed could handle. And all I got was 75 minutes of static. That's how over the top they were. And the only band that ever came close was Korn. When Korn played Tuxedo Junction, their stage volume was so excessive that all the kick drum signal coming through the soundboard was fried. And the bass frequencies were fried. You could still hear the guitars and the vocals, but all the low-end frequencies were completely toasted and staticky because it was just more than the board could handle. In this case, John Entwistle's band fried the whole thing. Everybody on there was playing at such excessive volume that the board couldn't handle it. So there you go, guys. Quantifiable scientific proof that John Entwistle's band were the loudest band, certainly that ever played Tuxedo Junction, and definitely the loudest band that I ever saw. And the funny thing is, there was no point to it. It was just irrelevant. It was absurd. Whew. And I might be missing a couple more, but you know what? I think that sums it up pretty well. How are you going to top that story about John Entwistle? I can't, so I'm not going to try. I want to thank you guys for listening, for tuning into Tent Talks Tunes. Don't forget, Rule Breakers Ball. It's only a little more than a week away in Spartanburg with 10 headlining bands. The Devotional Devo Fan Festival, October 10th and 11th, with my hand-picked group of devoted superstars, the David Kendrick Quintophrenia, playing a set of songs revolving around the many talents of David Kendrick, of Sparks, Devo, Shoo Shoo, Gleaming Spires, and Bates Motel. Brown Mountain Lights Festival, October 25th in Morganton, North Carolina. Antiseen headlining. Danbury Record and CD Expo, November 15th. I will be selling. And of course, all the usual internet bourgeois, my YouTube channel, my Discogs, eBay, Bandcamp, my website. And of course, if you want to mail something, I love mail. P.O. Box 173, Newton, North Carolina, 28658. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Great fun to wax rhapsodic about the loudest fucking bands I've ever seen. My old pal Jill from Florida just tuned in. Jill, you might have missed it, but it'll be on my YouTube channel very soon, so don't despair. Jill used to gently mock me for always wearing earplugs at shows. And for what you just heard over the last hour, now you know why. Anyway, I do hope to be back in about 167 hours' time. So until we meet again, this is indeed Malcolm Tent saying so long from the Tar Heel State. Harry says goodbye, too.